So, all right, well, it's PJ and Charlie. So we're here in Palm Springs with my friend Steve and his friends, his lovely fur babies, PJ and Charlie. And Steve, I know because of a connection, he reached out to me when I first moved here about Liberace, who's one of my favorites. And Steve has a history with the Liberace that he's going to share with us today, and I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, I had been living in Palm Springs for a few years, back in the early 1980s, late 1970s even, and playing nightclubs and hotels here in Palm Springs. And I was serving as one of Frank Sinatra's pianists. So I was getting a lot of high-profile gigs in town. And friends of Lee's, Liberace's, said to me, you know, you really should meet Lee. You have the same sense of humor, and both in the music business and piano and all. And so a dinner party was arranged in 1981, and we met and hit it off right away as friends. There was no monkey business. He was just a great guy, and it turned out to be a really good friend over the years. After coming here to his estate that he named Cloisters, it was finally suggested, well, why don't you move into one of the guest houses on the property? And I thought about it for a while, and then I said I'd have to pay lease rent. I don't want to be some kind of a hanger-on kind of person. I want to form a lease. And he said, well, I don't want to take your money. And I said, well, you got to come up with something. And he said, why don't you make that donation to my charitable foundation? And I said, great idea. So that's what I did for 6 years. This property, when he bought it, it was an abandoned motel. Originally, this property, the Cloisters, was built in 1930. It was built as an annex to the Catholic Church across the street. This is where the nuns would live. That lasted 10 or 12 years, and the church sold it. It became a motel called the Cloisters Motel. And then by the 1960s, it was abandoned and scheduled to be torn down. Lee had a house a couple of blocks north of here that he had just bought, and he heard about this. Friends of his brought him over. He looked at this abandoned motel. Original Spanish colonial architecture, just gorgeous, right? And he thought, what a shame for this to be torn down. And so he made an offer to buy it, and with the intent of remodeling it and refurbishing it and turning it into a private residence for himself, which he did. That started in 1968. By 1971, he had moved in. Just a tremendous property. The main house has 8,500 square feet.
Wow.
7 or 8 bedrooms and 8 or 9 bathrooms, something like that. And then a 4-car garage and a large 3-bedroom guest house, which he had his mother living in.
Is that what's right over this wall?
No, next to the 3-bedroom guest house is a 2-bedroom guest house, which was also vacant, and that's the one that I leased. And I moved in about a year later, it'd be March of 1982. And I lived there for 6 years until just after his passing. As we see it today, it hasn't been touched. They remodeled it some. The estate, Liberace's estate, sold the property, and the current owner is the CEO of E! Entertainment Channel.
Okay.
And his primary residence of choice is in Switzerland. And after buying this property, what would that be, the late 80s or something like that, he never came back. He pays the taxes on it, pays the gardener, pays the pool man, but has never been back, and the house has not been opened since. They did try to add on a couple of things here and there, and then just left it. And so it looks really bad now, but when I look at it, I see roof lines that are familiar, and I remember fun parties and fun things we had here on this property.
I look forward to hearing a little bit more about that. So you said this was where Mrs. Liberace lived, as in his mother, not his wife.
Frances was his mother's name.
Yeah.
And you can see her part of, and we'll walk around the perimeter here and you see it better, but there to your right is the roof line of Frances Liberace.
Oh, the farther back
Correct.
part? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was her home, and this over here was a guest cottage originally planned for her caregiver.
Mm-hmm.
She did not like living in Palm Springs. She found it boring. All of her friends were in LA or in Las Vegas. So he moved her back to Las Vegas. That's when he sold these 2 parcels of land, but kept a lifetime leasehold agreement for himself outside of the sale of the 4-car garage and the guest cottage I eventually occupied. So they stayed with Liberace, but what was his mother's house was sold to a couple, Vince Franza and Ken Fossler.
So he split he divided the property up afterwards. So it was all one parcel at the beginning.
Well, yes, it was back in the 1930. Well, in 1930, when this was built, it was 4 parcels.
Ah, okay, okay.
But they joined the 4 parcels to make one big building.
But tax-wise, it was probably still 4 parcels.
Correct.
And he just like knocked down the walls or whatever, the fences.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Wow. So this has been empty for that long?
Yes.
No kidding.
This wall on the outside was added.
Okay, was this a drive? This is just a
Yes.
driveway? That wasn't a garage then, was it? Was that
Where you see that door now, that
Yeah.
did not exist. That was an
Okay.
open air courtyard that about 25 feet later was my front door. They have since enclosed that courtyard with that ugly door. It's just awful.
Yeah, it is.
But it was beautiful at one time, all Spanish adobe from 1930. It was quite beautiful. What we see here on the right, the French windows and the clay tile roof, that was my bedroom, and it had windows on all 3 sides. Quite pretty with the garden view and all. And Lee decorated it all for me. He just asked me, what are your favorite colors? And I told him, and he did the whole place up, and it's really, really beautiful. Wow. It's a wonderful place to live. I enjoyed it very much.
So in the center is where like the swimming pool area was?
The other side of this building?
Yeah.
Yeah, the property had 2 pools. A swimming pool for my cottage, and then a swimming pool for the main house.
Yeah. How much time did he live here in Palm Springs?
A lot.
Yeah.
He had, 5 or 6 houses, but this was his primary residence, and he preferred to be here. And he was here year-round.
Mm-hmm.
He liked the summers here very much. And so we'd see him every couple of months. He'd be here for a month or so.
And at this point, he still had the apartment building on Beverly Boulevard.
Yes.
We talked about.
Well, office building.
Yeah, but he had the penthouse, right?
Penthouse up top.
And which house did he have in LA at this point? Was it the Kings Road one?
At that point?
Yeah.
Only the Beverly, it's called Boulevard Towers, or Beverly Towers is what it's called, that office building.
Yeah.
That's all he had in LA.
Oh, really?
Right.
Oh, okay.
He had a house on Herald Way,
Yeah.
which is actually in West Hollywood. But it sounded better to say Hollywood Hills, so that's what he said, but it's West Hollywood. And his new boyfriend at the time, in the late 70s, talked him into selling that and buying this office building with the penthouse on top instead. And so that's what happened. That penthouse was beautiful. It was my favorite of all of his homes that he had, was that it was just amazing, with a rooftop pool, the views all the way to Catalina and all the way to Santa Monica, just amazing views. But he only used that as a one-night stopover when he was flying in or flying out of LAX. That's all he used that for.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't spend any more than 24 hours there at a time.
How many in his houses of his properties? How many of them had piano-shaped pools?
Only one.
Yeah.
The first one in Sherman Oaks.
I thought there was going to be more than that. Okay.
No, just and that pool's still there today.
Yeah.
It's gone through, I think, 3 different owners since he sold it, but it's there, and the pool looks the same.
Didn't his mother, wasn't her house in Sherman Oaks too?
She lived at that house with him.
Oh, that's the house. Is that where she was robbed?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. As he told me, they lived there as a family. There was a room for George as well, but he kept an apartment or a condominium in North Hollywood because he didn't really want to be under the same roof with his mother all the time. And plus, he was a young guy in his 30s, and he wanted to have dates and rendezvous, and that's not always great when your mother is, standing in the doorway.
She doesn't sound like a very warm individual.
No, I only met her once. She was very stern, very stoic.
Polish Catholic.
Nothing. She was not happy with anything.
Yeah.
At all. And he would give her furs and jewelry and servants and everything she wanted, and she was not happy with anything. And when she died, I'll tell you the truth. I don't care who likes it or doesn't like it, but he was famous for being devoted to his mother. But when she died, he said, "Thank God I'm free. I'm free."
Well, I can understand that.
He didn't say that in front of cameras, but that's what he said privately. He said it a number of times.
I believe that. That had to be a lot of stress to, because I'm sure she wanted to be part of everything.
Right.
And almost, I don't want to say, he probably felt she demanded it or something. I don't know if she literally demanded it, but it seemed like she demanded attention.
Yeah, well, from what I got from him is that she stuck her nose in every part of his business, in everything, and that was just too much for him.
Aside from the fact that he was clearly the most successful of the brothers, was he her favorite, do you think?
I would say so.
Yeah.
I would say so. George opened a very successful music publishing company, and so George was financially independent. People don't know that. They think Lee supported him his whole life.
Yeah.
But actually, he owned a successful publishing firm in Los Angeles. And he was married 5 different times in his lifetime. And never lived under Lee's roof. Lee always had a bedroom ready, a guest room ready for him and ready for his sister Angie. But they didn't live under his roof like his mother did.
I didn't realize George was married that many times.
5, yeah.
And Dora was the big wife? The most famous wife, I guess?
Well, because she was the last one.
Okay.
She was a nice lady.
Yeah.
Quiet. When Lee died, she, I don't know how she assumed the role of being head of the museum, but she did, and that was a mistake financially. She didn't have business experience, so that changed quickly. But she was a nice enough lady.
Before we go to the front of the house, which I can't wait to do because I want to hear more stories about this, can you tell me about Rudy Liberace and the deal there? Because just for anyone who doesn't know, Steve's going to address this, but Rudy Liberace was Lee Liberace. If you don't mind, I'm going to call him Lee too. He wasn't a friend of mine. I knew that's what is an endearing term by friends, but it's just something I'm used to saying. But Lee had a brother named Rudy who died in the 60s. And I have his obituary actually, and it was important because his grave. On Liberace's grave, Rudy's name was on it.
Correct. He was there.
And then he was there.
He was buried there, yes.
And then he was exhumed.
Yes, by his kids.
And why is that?
Well, his kids wanted him to be buried in their own family
Catholic
plot.
cemetery.
No, well, I don't know. With them. They wanted their family together.
So it wasn't relative that it'd be a Catholic cemetery. Well, another Catholic cemetery, we'll say. Because San Fernando Mission, I think, is where he is. And I think that's Catholic. But anyway.
That's where he's moved to.
So was there a falling out with his family?
Yeah.
Because of that?
Yeah, always. Well, no. Because of that?
I mean, was that a result of the falling out? Rudy being taken out of Liberace's grave?
He was taken out of there after Lee died.
Oh.
I believe. Yeah.
Okay. So I know his name was on it.
Correct.
And then his name was taken off.
Right. But there was a falling out between Rudy and Lee and their mother and everybody else many, many years before Rudy's death.
I wonder if the Rudy that I have is what's the father's name? No, it wouldn't be, would it?
No, what was his father's name? An Italian first name.
His father. Okay, here's Rudy. Yeah, Rudy died in 60. I don't have the date. 66 or 67, I think it was. April 30th. Found dead today at a motel, actually, which is what was his cause of death?
He drank himself to death.
Did he? And he was so young, 36.
Yeah.
So Rudy was in the grave. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. And then this falling out was over what, money or the family?
No, falling out was many, many years prior, and it was because of Rudy's alcoholism. And I don't know if there was drug use at the time, but it was primarily alcoholism, and it was alcoholism in a really big way. Liberace, truth be told, had no sympathy whatsoever for people with addictions. He just had zero, and his mother the same way. They thought it was a sign of weakness, and they tried to help him as much as they could, and of course that didn't work. And so they basically washed their hands of him. How I became privy to that information from Lee is because at one time at dinner we were talking about Elvis Presley, and I asked him about Presley, and he told me that he and Frank Sinatra and Jackie Gleason, three or four of them, together did an intervention on Elvis in Las Vegas, and it failed. Elvis just got mad and said, "I'm not going to any treatment center. No, get the F out of my suite, get out of this hotel." And with that, Lee and Sinatra and Gleason washed their hands of Elvis Presley. Lee said to me, "What a shame and what a waste." Those are his words. What a waste it was. He said, Elvis had been given everything. He'd been given this talent, given the popularity, given the success. He had every advantage in the world that everybody else dreams of having. And he blew it. He put it all into drugs and died at a young age when he shouldn't have. Mm-hmm. And he thought it was disgusting and just a weak character. And he said, and that's just like my brother Rudy. And then so he went into the story about his brother Rudy and what he thought of people with addiction. Whether you like it or not, that's the truth. That was his view of people with addiction.
So he's known as this, to the public, this smiling, happy-go-lucky guy who likes to dress up nice and perform. But he had an edge to him, a hard edge to him, clearly. He was able to turn that...
Yeah, everyone does.
Yeah.
Everyone does. And, he had his strong convictions. Unfortunately, in my own opinion, I think he was wrong about a lot of things that he was steadfastly for. Mm-hmm. He also trusted the wrong people. And he would go to his grave defending these people as his friends and that they're looking out for his best interests, when in fact, they were robbing him blind. You could talk to his own attorney today, who's in practice in Thousand Oaks, Joel Strout. He's still in business. He handles Britney Spears and a lot of big-name Hollywood people. And he'll tell you that Lee just trusted the wrong people, and it cost him in the end.
Well, okay, speaking of the end then, we know that Liberace was ill. We know now it was HIV related. Back then it was, Seymour Heller, who was Liberace's manager, mm-hmm. was trying to keep it all nice and pretty, and I remember the watermelon diet. I remember that was going on, and just he had pneumonia, which is what he ultimately died from, was pneumonia, because of the result of HIV. And
I was there,
yeah.
And I was there at his bedside, beginning February 2nd of 1987, and he died on February 4th, and I knew of his health situation prior to that. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you what I witnessed and what I saw. He had emphysema. He had a mild heart disease. and the AIDS-related complex, the ARC that he had from having AIDS, worsened those conditions. He was on a oxygen tube merely to help him breathe. He had sought treatment on late January of '87, sought treatment at Eisenhower Medical Center just down the road, went into emergency room at 9:30 at night, and they turned him away. They said, there's nothing more that can be done for you. There's no cure for any of this.
Was there, remember.
What I was saying is I watched him die from emphysema.
Mm-hmm.
Why did he die from emphysema? Well, because he had ARC,
Right.
AIDS-related complex.
Yeah.
Well, why did he have that? Well, because HIV and AIDS.
I
So
see.
you could track it all the way back. But when he's laying there in this rented hospital bed that was brought in and put in his den, he was dying of emphysema.
All right.
Same way Johnny Carson went.
Let's go to the front and have a look at this place from the
Okay.
other side.
This was a part of the Cloisters estate that was his mother's home, here behind the walls of the Cloisters. On the left there it was the dining room, in the center the living room with the double doors, and then a family room and den to the far right. Also built in 1930.
Gosh, I can see there's a lot of termite damage on this thing, looks like.
Been abandoned for, what, 30 years, 40 years?
Nobody's lived here?
Nobody. Nobody's been inside my cottage since I locked the doors.
That's insane. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not insane. It just doesn't make sense. But people with a lot of money,
Yeah.
a lot of times don't make sense.
Yeah.
But
Eventually, this will all be a tear down, and somebody will build a real nice house on this land. I don't see it being restored.
so this fence wasn't there.
That is original.
This
and the
is-
shrubs are original. The chain link is original. The palm trees are original. As you can see, they're not maintained.
Mm-hmm.
And with my cottage being on this side, the other side of this living room, flip side, is my pool and jacuzzi.
Okay.
And a very large yard with a pergola and picnic area. Quite nice.
Very. Well, I mentioned maybe the shrubs were it's just not a very nice fence, that's all. But we got a beautiful entrance right there.
It was all covered in shrubbery at one
okay.
time.
So you didn't see it? Okay.
You couldn't see the fence, yeah. Here you'll see there is a breezeway in between. This window is a bedroom, his mother's bedroom. There's a breezeway in between that and the 4-car garage. I don't know, maybe the other end would show it better.
Here, hold up. This is a heck of a piece of property.
Yeah, there you see the breezeway.
Okay, so
Yeah, and the pool beyond that. And all of that was mine when I lived here. And Lee used the garages to store his cars that he would use when he'd come down to Palm Springs. He had a limousine there, some custom cars, Cadillac and
I've
such.
seen the pictures of like a station wagon with the piano keys on. Was that like picking people up at the airport thing?
In the 80s, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, in the 70s. He had a white limousine, a white Lincoln limousine that he would use to pick up people at the airport. But he kept fun cars, custom cars, antiques here for his use when he'd be in town.
Maybe some of the ones that are in Vegas now. Those they have. I was there. Troy and I were there not that long ago. The Liberace
Garage.
Museum. Yeah, the garage.
Liberace
right.
Garage. It's a wonderful exhibit.
It is. It is. Yeah. Go ahead. No, you're right.
All the cars that he kept here were sold at auction.
Okay.
Nothing was kept. They made a decision to sell off everything from his personal life and keep only his stage cars, his stage costumes, stage pianos, but nothing from his personal life, which is a shame because I think the fans would like to see what did he drive to the market in.
Yeah.
You know, and his fun cars. So they were all sold at auction. They all exist today in private collections. You see them show up in some of the Liberace fan club groups online. People have them.
Most of the things then you think that Liberace that they sold at the auction were
personal,
and people kept them because they were Liberace fans.
You're right.
It wasn't like I'm gonna get that piano because I wanted it in my, I need something to match something. Everyone that bought was a Liberace fan,
right?
Mostly, and stuff went for a steal back then, didn't it? I mean,
well, it was higher than they would without Liberace's name attached. But the thing is, today, a piano of his can go for $150,000 and more.
Yeah.
If you find them on the market. Liberace owned items is a big deal, and the value is just through the roof. I don't know why, but it is.
He's such a character, and he just encapsulated so much whimsy and talent and excess and tragedy and
fun and talent.
Yeah,
he was a tremendous talent. He really was.
Yeah.
If you see this breezeway between his mother's master bedroom and the 4-car garage. You see that breezeway there? One afternoon, I'm swimming in the pool, and I hear this gate over here open. There was a gate that joined from the main house to the garage. And I knew Lee was home, so I thought, well, he's going shopping or something. Well, his new boyfriend, Jamie, Garey James Wyatt was his name, comes walking through that gate and through that breezeway carrying a brown leather satchel, like a briefcase, but over the shoulder satchel. Heavy. Carrying it and, looking around left and right, and walked by my pool and approached a back door to Liberace's mother's former home here, where someone was holding a sliding glass door open for him, expecting him to be there. And I said, well, hi, Jamie, how are you? And he looked very nervous, and he wouldn't say hello to me. I said, Jamie, what's wrong? And he just went like that, and walked in through that door. Well, I stood up and I was behind him. Are you okay? This door we saw here, for the front door of the house, was also open.
Mm-hmm.
I could see through the house to this street.
Yeah.
And parked here on the street was Lee's longtime trusted maid, pretty young blonde woman, Dorothy, with in her red Ford Escort, with the engine running and the passenger door open. And Jamie quickly trots through the house, gets in that car, slams the door closed, and they peel off. You could hear the tires screeching. Peel off down the road and off to who knows where. I thought that was really strange, She's the maid. Why wouldn't she pick him up at the front door where she normally parks? Why here?
Yeah.
Why in my house? And so I inquired with the security person that was standing there, what's going on? He says, you saw nothing. You keep your effing mouth shut. I said, why? What did I see? So I went on with my day, right? Well, about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon that day, my phone rings, the intercom phone from the main house to the guest house in my kitchen. And I answered it, and it was the house manager, George Liniers from France, telling me, you haven't seen Lee yet today, have you? And I said, no. And he says, well, avoid him. He's really, really angry. Just avoid him. Do whatever you can. Don't answer your door. Don't answer the windows. Don't answer anything. And I said, well, it's kind of hard to, hide from Lee here on this property. Why is he mad? And they said, well, last night they flew into LAX. he and Jamie, and they came straight here. He was on tour and he had a lot of cash. Lee always carried a lot of cash on him, and he had it in a brown satchel. And when they got here, they didn't unload the luggage or anything from the car. They just went straight to bed. And the next day, Lee goes to retrieve his luggage from the car and see his luggage there, but the satchel was $17,000 in 1982 money was missing. And he knew he had it because he'd flown with it and knew he put it in the trunk of his car, but now it's gone. And he was blaming everybody and anybody in his path as to who took his cash. And there was jewelry and also in there as well, he said. And, you know, my heart stopped because I knew what I'd seen just a couple of hours earlier that day. And I knew that I was, you know, threatened and told to keep my mouth shut about it. Then, and I never did say anything to Lee about that. As time went on, as the years went on, the affair that his boyfriend was having with the maid became known to everybody except Liberace. And I just thought, how sad, you know? How
was he like, was Jamie, Liberace's boyfriend, was Liberace like, I don't want to hear it? Is there anything you say anything about it? I do not want to hear it.
He was that kind of guy for sure.
Yeah, blinders on his.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely he was. So I knew that if I said something, I would be the only person saying that. And who's he going to believe? Is he going to believe his own boyfriend? Is he going to believe the trusted maid that he took to the White House with him as a date? He took her. He trusted these people. Or is he going to believe me, his piano student and tenant in the back cottage?
Yeah.
Who's he going to believe?
Yeah.
It put me in a terrible, terrible position. It still makes me angry today. But I couldn't say anything. There was one afternoon, I was coming out to get in my car, and Jamie had one of the custom Cadillacs pulled out and was detailing it himself, was cleaning the rims and polishing the car. And I struck up a conversation with him and asked how he was doing, and he said, it may take me all day to detail this car, but I'm going to get it done. And he says, if I detail it and show it to Lee, maybe he'll give it to me. And I thought, you know, why?
He's got access to it. He can use it whatever he wants.
Right. He had the keys to, you know, 10 different cars and multiple houses.
Yeah.
And a credit card, he could hire a private plane and go anywhere he wanted in the world, and usually did. But he was after what he could get, and screwing the maid behind Lee's back all along. It was terrible. Fast forward, that maid, she died of AIDS.
No kidding.
She was married with 2 kids or 4 kids, sons, I believe. Well, you know.
And we know Jamie died of AIDS.
Right.
How long after Liberace died did he die, do you know?
In the 90s.
Okay.
A few years. Well, Jamie died in 1995, penniless, sleeping on the couch of Lee's former publicist in San Diego. He had no money left. He sold his story to the National Enquirer for $50,000, and he went through that money in no time.
Liberace died in my arms. That's what his story was.
Yeah.
Because I have that. I have all those articles. But that was one of them anyway.
Yeah. And the reason I told you that story about the stealing the money, that leads up to the story when Lee died. This was originally the original front entrance to the house. And beyond this door is a courtyard and the main entry to the house. But nobody ever used it. Lee never used it. They always came in the side way through the garage. And this was just forgotten about.
When this was a motel, was this the entrance to the motel, do you know?
No. He added a whole wall in the perimeter.
Okay.
One afternoon, about 4:30, we were sitting out in this courtyard, having coffee, and somebody pulled up in a white sedan and got out and threw a puppy or a small dog over the fence, got back in and drove off. I witnessed that, and people knew that Liberace had a reputation for, taking and rescuing dogs, and so they would give him their dogs if they couldn't care for them anymore. And he kept that dog, added him to his collection of 25 other dogs. But that was weird to see somebody throw a dog over the fence.
Just abandoning it, yeah.
Right.
But I guess
Driving
with confidence, that it'll be cared for. But that is.
It was.
Wow.
This window you see here, that's the dining room, which was the original living room to the Cloisters property in 1930. When Lee added on so much, he added on another actual living room and used this original living room as a dining room. That was beautifully decorated. These guys. This is just a garden on the side of this wall and a large fountain.
I still can't get over the fact that it's just been empty for so long.
Well, the main house has not been empty. It was purchased from the estate by a man named Stephen Hemming, who was a friend of mine and a real nice guy while he was alive. Then upon his death, a gentleman from Los Angeles, Brett, purchased the estate and owns it to this day, and he's done quite a bit of remodeling of his own. Originally there was, as you've seen in old photographs, there was a circular driveway here in front, and the current owner in his remodeling took that out and just enlarged the garden. This, as we see here, was not the front entrance really. This was originally a circular driveway, but the current owner in his remodeling of the property removed the circular driveway and have just the one carport area leading to the former garage. The cars would park here on the right side of the property and walk across to the left side where the front door was.
Okay, I still can't get over the fact that this was a motel. I had no idea.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I have that picture. I want to see if that picture shows the exterior of the house in that awful tabloid article that we talked about, and it would show the condition. I wish I thought to print up a picture of the. Okay, so here's the picture I have, which is not perfect, but there you can see the two driveway, the two garage bits. That's where the chandelier was. I was here in the early 90s, I think, and I got a couple of pictures of the house when it still had that chandelier in front of it.
The candelabra.
The candelier, yes, of course.
And do you know that this current owner still has that candelabra?
Where is it?
Well, he has it in storage in Los Angeles, but he was smart enough to keep it.
Good.
And he kept some of the tiles, and he kept the tiles on the front door that said Casa de Liberace and said the Cloisters. He kept those, and I'm sure, they're worth quite a bit of money.
So with this house, how is it set up geographically? I mean, what was the front doors were right here?
Yes.
Right in front of us?
No. Around the corner to the left.
Oh, so when you went in, you walked around the corner?
Correct.
Okay.
What we see here, these windows and this fireplace.
Yeah.
It's a two-sided fireplace. One side faces out to an outdoor patio, and the other side to the living room, the new living room that he built. That's what you're looking at, is his living room. Then here to the right, what looks like a garage was originally a garage that he built, and then converted that into a family room. It was never used as a garage again after the late 1970s. It was strictly a beautifully decorated family room with Tiffany lamps and a collection of different antiques. and that is the room he died in. It's right there, right by this window. You see the two arched windows? It'd be the window on the left. Right up against it, they put the hospital bed right up against that glass, and he could hear the fans outside.
Were they like having a vigil out here?
They did for over a week, between 600 and 650 people. Here on the street, they blocked off the street. People lined up here, and then this parking lot was filled with people for a week until he died, day and night. And he could hear them. I talked to him about it, and he was real pleased. He had a nice smile on his face when he could hear them.
So I didn't realize that there was a vigil. I didn't realize that people knew it was that close to the end for him. I thought they kept it pretty well under wraps.
No, word definitely got out.
How did that happen? Was it somebody at the hospital that sold it to the tabloids, or do you think, or?
The rumors started maybe a year and a half before. And as you know, Las Vegas, there are no secrets amongst the powers that be in Vegas. Everybody knows what everybody's doing, right?
Yeah. Let me move
and
to the side.
The main newspaper there, is it the Review Journal? Is that what it's called? Las Vegas Review Journal? Something like that. Was owned by Mr. Greenspun. What was that his name? Oscar something. He became mayor. The ABC affiliate in town and the NBC affiliate in town were owned by Johnny Carson. So you got two media moguls in town that talk with each other all the time about various things, right? Well, when this came up, when Lee was diagnosed in Las Vegas at Sunrise Hospital there, he was diagnosed with what we now know as AIDS. There are no secrets in that town, and Oscar Goodman, I'm sorry, that's his name, Oscar Goodman, got word of that and told Johnny Carson about it. Word got around, and it was hinted in all over the place. Carson thought, he liked Liberace, and he thought, I got to put him on my show before he dies. And he did. And he booked a very thin, almost emaciated Liberace onto his show for the last time. I think it was 1986, to perform, and he gave him carte blanche. Usually an artist will go on the Tonight Show and maybe do one song and then sit at the couch for a funny banter for 3 or 4 minutes, and that's it. They move on to the next guest, right? Not this time. He gave Lee carte blanche to do anything, and Lee did 7 minutes, 8 minutes, 9 minutes of classical music, and then sat down at the couch for another equal amount of time interview. Unprecedented in Tonight Show history. And throughout that interview, if you look at it today, you can see that Lee's smiling and as bubbly as he normally was, but Carson knew the truth, knew that Lee was dying of AIDS, and he looked so sad. Carson looked so sad through the whole interview. Very telling now today.
Sure. I noticed that when I was watching interviews of him not that long ago, and I don't know if it was something that he had an issue with through his whole career, but he was short of breath a lot when I saw. Maybe it was at the end, but I know that he would tire, and he was really gasping, not gasping, but it was subtle enough. It was actually pronounced enough to pick up on it.
Really.
But I don't think a lot of people.
I didn't even notice that.
It might have been on Carson. No, I know it wasn't that Oprah interview. I think that was the last one he did, wasn't it? The Oprah one. Right.
I can tell you about that too. I did not notice him struggling for air on camera. If you did, then you're much more perceptive than I am. What was going on was, he was playing Radio City Music Hall and selling out and making attendance records and breaking attendance records. He broke his own attendance record. He was a marvelous success there. In between songs, when he would step off stage, there would be a guy with an oxygen tank and an oxygen mask, and for a few 30 seconds or so, he would breathe in the oxygen in between songs and then come back on stage. So that was going on. But as far as him showing signs of being out of breath, I never saw that. he prided himself in thinking that nobody knew, but yet it was rumored quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then when he suddenly lost so much weight,
Yeah.
I mean, he lost so much, 70 pounds he lost, something like that. Then, you know, his publicist and his manager were hit with requests from the media to explain why. And only then did Liberace address it, and he said it was on this watermelon diet, which in fact was the truth. But he wasn't on the watermelon diet to lose weight. He was on the watermelon diet to cleanse his body of this virus, this AIDS virus. He thought that would work, that in prayer. He thought for sure that would, because it helped him once before in 1960, saved his life. So he's doing it now again. And so he wasn't lying at all when he said he was on the watermelon diet. It was just his last-ditch effort to save himself from AIDS.
So it all unfolded here, and you're saying his hospital bed. I'll move back over here. His hospital bed was behind that, the one on the left, the door on the left, which was converted into a family room.
You see two arched windows. The arched window on the left.
Okay.
Wheeled right up against that window.
And he was diagnosed, or rather, it was terminal at that point. He wasn't going to go anywhere after Eisenhower, and he was discharged, and they brought him back here to die.
Correct.
And that indeed happened. How long was he here after the hospital before he died?
2 weeks.
2 weeks he was.
And upon coming here, he called his attorney, once again, Joel Stroat, in Thousand Oaks, California. Called him and had him drive out here real fast to draw up yet another updated last will and testament, which they did. Lee, in that last year of his life, maybe he had 3 or 4 different wills. He kept changing his mind on how much money he's leaving to people. And so the last updated will was done late January of 1987, right here, witnessed by friends of mine. One of them's still alive. That was, then Lee died. He was communicative all the way up to February 2nd, and he died on the 4th. So he was very much of sound mind and body. You know, he wasn't dying of dementia or any kind of neurological. He had all his marbles. He really did. And he was able to see a lot of visitors. It was only the last 36 hours of life that he kind of dozed off.
Was there a parade of people coming? That sounds negative.
Well, you're speaking the truth.
Well, but I mean,
it was.
Not getting into the afterwards, but I mean, when people knew he was circling the drain, is a very crude way to put it. But they came.
Sorry, Lee.
Came and giving.
I don't know him.
I apologize too. It was crude, but people did come and say, "I got to say goodbye to Lee."
Yes.
And like who did you see?
Yes. Well, I was in Japan. I was in Kobe, Japan. I had done a movie over there that hit real big, and I was the only Caucasian American person in this Japanese movie. So I stood out like a sore thumb, and so I was riding high on that success. I had records that were doing well. 2 of them went gold for me. I've got the gold records for those. And I had a TV series and other media. And Lee's manager, Seymour, called my mother and told her, you know, if Steve wants to see Lee, this is the time. She called me in Japan, and within hours I was on a plane, and I got back here. Pulled up here to see 650 people with candles, and all sharing their memories about Lee when they saw him playing here, they saw him playing there, and all the people outside was very happy. It was solemn, but they were talking about happy memories. And wasn't it great when he did this on television and when he did that? Or when the reporter asked him, you know, how do you feel about all the rumors in the press about, you know, you being, you know, fey. Fey was the word back then. And they say unkind things about you and they snicker. How do you handle that? And he said, I laugh all the way to the bank.
Sure.
And that's where that saying of his originated from. they were sharing these stories, and it was very heartwarming to see. And as my car pulled up, Lee's real-life best friend pulled up in her car too. Her name was Tito Minor, T-I-D-O, and her last name Minor, M-I-N-O-R. She had been best friends with Lee for 4 or 5 decades, since the 1940s. She was the wife of Don Feddersen, who produced all of Lee's television shows. And she is the reason that he became famous. He was a very highly paid piano player, playing the best nightclubs in the United States, the Waldorf and the Plaza. And he happened to be booked to be playing the Del Coronado Hotel in San Diego. Back then, I think it was $2,500 a week, which was a lot of money in the 1940s for anybody. But he was getting that and packing the room. So Tito and her husband, Don Feddersen, were staying at the hotel. They check out of the hotel to drive back home to Los Angeles. And fog set in, and they couldn't get any further. They had to turn around, go back to the Del Coronado. And the husband, Don Feddersen, who was a TV producer, radio producer, and now TV producer, said, "My God, what are we going to do? We're stuck here. What are we going to do?" And she said, "Oh, come on, honey. Let's go see the piano player that everybody's talking about."
And he was...
So they went in, and she had to drag her husband in to see this piano player. He didn't want to see it. Dragged him in, and he was floored. He was so impressed with Liberace's show and his charisma. And he said, "This guy is television. This guy's..." And then spoke with him afterwards, had him come up to LA for a test, and then they offered him the TV show, which is a summer replacement show.
Okay. And thus it began, because he started off quite, I don't know, what were the words? It was just conservative compared to what he became. You know, so Tito was one of the people that showed up that night. You saw her
afternoon.
Yeah.
That about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on February 2nd, 1987. And so I got out of my car, so she got out of hers, and I said, "Tito, how are you?" And she said, "I'm very, very, very sad." And I said, "Well, come on, let's go in the house." And so we went in the main gate, which would be right in front of that fireplace, and walked around the corner to the front door, so to speak, together on the 2nd. And we each went in to see Lee, and I talked with him a while, and he asked me about the music I was doing in Japan, and we went over some arrangements even. He asked me if I had polished up that arrangement of Malagueña El Cumbanchero that he had written for me. And I lied to him, and I said yes, when actually I didn't have it perfected yet. It took me a few years after that before I really got it down right. But he was still giving me a piano lesson, 48 hours before he died. He was a swell guy, a great friend. Had a nice visit with him, and getting back to your original question, was there a parade of well-wishers? Yes, there was, and it bothered me greatly because they would come in from Los Angeles or from Las Vegas, and they'd go in to see Lee and then come out here into the garden and have pretty much a cocktail party. Everybody laughing and carrying on, and loud, and
so he could hear it.
A little drunk, and I thought it was disrespectful. It really, really bothered me at the time. I thought it was just not right. Because you step inside the living room, and there's his attorney and his housekeeper and his sister, Angie, ashen face, just white, and very, very sad. Very sad. So such a dichotomy between the two scenes. Very odd. Very, very odd. And that parade of well-wishers went on until the morning that he died.
Just how disrespectful you felt that the scene was.
Yeah, it was. A lot of the visitors, they were glad to see each other. They ran into people from LA and Las Vegas they hadn't seen in a while. And everybody was acting like Lee wasn't in the next room dying. They were all laughing and camping it up and having a gay old time. And yet his sister and me and his best friend Tito and his lawyer, we were all sad. It was a horrible thing. But these other people were just very lighthearted, and God bless them. We all deal with tragedy and death in our own ways, but that was just foreign to me. It seemed greatly out of place.
And so he had clearly, I mean, he was a man of means, so he had medical attention here.
Well, there was no cure for what he had.
End of life care.
Well, to be specific, going back, going back maybe 3 years, 84, when he was diagnosed, he was prescribed specialized AIDS care, which is essentially a guy, in this case it was a male nurse in his mid-late 20s, who was well versed on caring for somebody with that gay cancer, that AIDS. And
I remember that. I remember that's what they used to call it.
Yeah, and so he was in charge of changing the linens. He wouldn't let anybody else in Lee's circle touch the linens, touch the towels, the bed sheets. All of Lee's employees, his band members and people he toured with, were all pulled into a meeting and told, don't touch any glass or coffee cup that Lee has touched. They gave him a few hour training on how to treat someone with AIDS and to not touch anything they've touched.
Yeah, crazy. Well, so I mean, it's not so crazy anymore in the last couple of years, but back then, yeah, I remember that nobody knew.
Yeah, and so this AIDS specialist, this caregiver, was the one who did everything as far as touching Lee. Yet, when some of his well-wishers would kiss him on the forehead, I held his hand. I didn't think I could catch anything, not even the flu, by holding his hand like that, you know. And he looked good. That's the thing that people need to know, is that he looked really, really good right up to the end. He put on a little weight, and his color was great. He looked wonderful, and he still had his toupee on until the last few hours of life. So I had my nice visit with him on the afternoon and the evening of the 2nd of February, and then drove around the corner to my cottage. But before I left the front gate to get into my car, some of the news reporters, this is all filled with press, cameras and lights, and one of them approached me, and I started to talk to her. As before, nobody else coming out that door would speak to the press, but I did. And then more press figured, well, he's talking, so it's okay.
Yeah.
So they approached as well, and I gave an interview to CNN, which was syndicated on video and in print all across the nation the next day. I think I sent you a copy of part of that interview. And in that interview, they were very careful about what questions they asked me. They wouldn't be today, but they were then. And I said something at the end of my interview that I stand by today. And that's when I told the reporter that Lee would like to be remembered for the way he lived, and the entertainment and the fun that he brought the public, and not he'd like to be remembered by the way he lived and not by the way he's dying.
Yeah, and that's it was show business to the end. You know what I mean? To the public. I mean, his friends knew, but as far as he's Liberace. It was all about how
it was September of 1986. I happened to go shopping at what was the Palm Springs Mall here on Tuckwitz and Farrell. They've since leveled a lot, There was a big mall there. And he called me in my cottage, said, come on, let's go shopping. I said, okay. And he said, come around the front. And so I did, and he was driving his Lincoln. He and I drove to the mall. And he looked really, really thin. Was wearing a floor-length black sable coat to hide how skinny he was. And I thought, because I've been hearing the same rumors on the press like everybody else. When we parked the car at the mall, is when he told me about him having AIDS. And
so he did. He was frank about it to his, his friends.
Oh yeah. But
Okay.
he thought that he beat it. And I didn't ask him any questions to let him talk. And he thought it wasn't a big deal because he was going to beat this, and that he had more things to do, and he wanted a house in Sedona he wanted to buy, and more shows, and he's going to televise the show at the Radio City Music Hall. He had all these plans, and that this was just a roadblock that would go away in a few months. He did, however, clear his entire calendar from middle of '86 through all of '87, canceled all the dates to recoup and recover. Well, that wasn't to be.
No. So he passed away. Who was in the room with him when he passed away?
Just the nurse. I was sitting in the living room next to his friend Tito. The housekeeper, that one that was betraying him all those years, was there. His boyfriend Jamie was usually in the kitchen. And the nurse, I think her name was Norma, I'm not sure, but she was in this family room attending Lee. Gladys Lucky, who was a housekeeper from Las Vegas, at his home in Las Vegas, drove out here to be with Lee. So she was in the house too. I got here about 9 o'clock, 9:30 in the morning, and Tito was there. And Tito went in to see Lee and they said he was in a coma. Well, he wasn't in a coma. He was just kind of out of it. He was sleeping in a way. And on no medications, just the oxygen mask. And Tito said, "You want to go see Lee again?" And I thought, I don't want to see him like that. He can't talk today. I talked with him 2 days ago, said everything I wanted to say. So I just sat on the couch in the living room next to Tito. And it was about 10:30 in the morning, maybe 10:40, something like that, on February 4th, when the nurse came into the living room from the den and said, "Folks, I'm sorry, he's gone." And that was tough words to hear, because I didn't associate death and he's gone with Liberace. I associated humor and fun and outrageous costumes and candelabras and fabulous lifestyle and fun. That's what I associated with Liberace. To now have to equate death with him, it didn't seem right at all. And the nurse went back into the den with Gladys Lucky, the housekeeper from Las Vegas, and they said that they'd cleaned up his face, put his toupee back on, and came out. And that's when the nurse said, "If you want to see Lee and pay your respects, do so now." And I didn't. I didn't have time to think, really, when after she said he's gone and we're preparing him for you folks to see him. At that sentence, his boyfriend, his maid, and the two people that witnessed his last will and testament, they were he thought really trusted friends. Those four people got together and made a beeline down the hall to the other end of the property where Lee's master bedroom and dressing room were. And I thought, that's odd. Why is the maid and his boyfriend and his two trusted friends going down that hall? I thought it was odd, so I got up and I followed them. I walked basically with them. They made their way to Lee's dressing room, opened up the drawers of his dressing table, and took out jewelry. I'm standing there at the entrance to the dressing room in disbelief, and I said, "What do you plan to do with those?" And one of the guys turned to me again and hand in my face and saying, you know, shut your fucking mouth. You got a big mouth. That's what your problem is. You got a big mouth. Shut your fucking mouth.
Seconds after he died.
You literally, less than a minute, yeah. And they started putting on all these rings and necklaces and bracelets and walking out. I was sickened. I still am today at the sight of that. It was just awful. I mean, they had no reaction to the words from the nurse saying he's gone, other than to huddle and make a fast beeline to steal the jewelry. That was their reaction. I was mortified. Now, fast forward, you know, everything ends up on eBay, and that jewelry has ended up on eBay, and the current owners, you know, bless their heart, they weren't part of that theft. They just bought it from the people that later died and had it sold on eBay.
They're all dead now, aren't they?
Who?
The people, the boyfriend, Jamie, the housekeeper that was screwing Jamie and Liberace over, and the trustees, quote unquote.
Yeah, right. The only people that are alive today are Lee's attorney,
Excuse me.
Lee's personal attorney who drew up the wills, and myself. Also, Dana Feddersen is alive, and he's a great guy. He's Tito's son.
Mm-hmm.
And he also was a good friend of Liberace's.
Yeah. And
Dana lives in Huntington Beach now. I think he's a great guy. He has a wonderful family and he's doing well.
So did anyone, you saw it happen, doesn't sound like there were any legal representatives here at that time.
His attorney
was here, present, and
right.
And there was not, he couldn't say anything, he didn't do anything about what you had just seen.
I did not tell him.
Okay.
I have, even recently as maybe a month and a half ago, got him on the phone. We could get him on the phone right now if you want. And I asked him, I told him what happened, and I said, and other things too, you know, like the house was used as like an Airbnb, illegal, for people to have their parties at, right after Lee died, and things were taken out of the house. And I asked him, how could this be? Because I witnessed it myself, so I know it happened. And he said, when Lee died, all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, I had so much to secure and tie down. He had houses all over the United States, and Nevada, New York, here, plus his investments and cash and bank accounts. I had to gather everything up, and it took me a week or so to get everything tied down.
Yeah.
And that is what he told me.
So Liberace was removed from the house, taken to...
Well, this is the interesting thing. He was pronounced dead by the nurse.
Yeah.
At about 10:30, 10:45 in the morning of February 4th, 1987. But because it would now come out, you know, cause of death, what is that? What is his cause of death? That they had to do a strategy session. So the attorney's on the phone with Seymour Heller, who was back in LA at this point, and the publicist, whose name was Jamie James, as to, you know, how do we spin this? How do we protect Lee's name and his brand? And it was determined to let family and such see Lee, and then call the doctor. The death has to be declared by a doctor, can't be declared by the nurse. So they called the doctor, and the quickest he could get out here was about 1 o'clock, 1:30. And he did, and then his report went to the coroner's office, I gather by phone, although he did have a fax machine set up here for that purpose. The coroner then released the news, the official news of Lee's death, and that was in the afternoon, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the 4th. So if you read reports in the media that say Liberace died in the afternoon of the 4th, well, the truth is he was announced dead, or he was pronounced
Yeah.
dead at that time by the doctor and by the coroner.
And that's when the craziness began.
In a way,
Liberace's body was taken to Forest Lawn.
it didn't make it.
Well, they got him, and then they had to bring him
Turn
around
around on
again.
the freeway, yeah.
Yeah.
The coroner showed up. It was a Chevy station wagon. I thought it'd be a coroner's van, but it turned out to be a station wagon. Pulled into this circular driveway here, and they went in and they got Lee and prepared his body for transport and wheeled him right out that gate in front of 650 people. And 650 people, and the press just fell silent as the gurney was brought out into the sunlight, and everybody got to see that. They put him in the back of the station wagon and drove off. A helicopter followed from the press news organization, followed and got the footage of them going on the freeway. The doctor, when he signed the death certificate, claimed it was, complications of emphysema and heart disease, which it was. It was.
Heller made that press conference
Right,
too. Yeah.
right. And they thought that would be the end of it.
Yeah.
Lee's on the freeway heading out to Forest Lawn in Hollywood Hills. Well, the coroner for Riverside County had big aspirations in politics. He wanted to be the supervisor. He wanted to go for state assembly and maybe the governor one day, the Senate one day. He had big aspirations. And he saw this as his opportunity to get some press. And he said, wait up, hold everything a minute here. I don't believe what the doctor has written in his death certificate. I am, what do you call it? Taking possession of the body. I'm
commandeering.
Yeah. And radioed to that station wagon to turn around under order of the county.
Because he didn't like the cause of death the way it was stated.
Right.
And because nothing about HIV or AIDS was on it at that point.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so the pictures are online to see.
Yeah.
The video is online of that car on the freeway and having to turn off and then go to Riverside.
So they took Lee away. Now, where did you go at that point? Did you stay in the house, or?
I did for a little bit, for maybe 2-3 days.
Mm-hmm. I meant like immediately afterwards. I mean, I'm just curious what the scene was. When they took Lee out, what were they doing in there?
I had left. The nurse said he was gone, and that was at 10:30, and then about 11:05, something like that, she said, if you want to see Lee, you can.
Okay.
And 1 or 2 days, his sister did. I did not. I went back to my cottage where we saw earlier, and when the chips are down, what do? You turn to family, don't you? I called my mother, and I told my mother, my piano teacher, my best friend, had just died. And typical of some people in her generation, she said that faggot was immoral. I'm glad he's dead. I'm glad he's dead. That's what my own mother said to me. And the last thing I said to my mother was, you don't understand, he was my best friend. He taught me a lot. Apparently you don't value that at all, and I hung up the phone. Today, what is it, March 2nd, 2023? I haven't spoken to her since. When family, I don't care who they are, if they're that bigoted against all homosexuals, myself included, in her case, it's best to just cut ties. You can't allow that negativity to be a part of your life. You have to go on with your life and friends that love you for who you are, and make your contributions to society until your own dying day. You can't be around these horribly bigoted, negative people. So to answer your question, that's what I did. And after I hung up the phone from my mother, hearing those awful, awful cold words, calling him what did she call him? Anyway, I hung up the phone, and to be honest, I fell to the floor, and I remember the feel of the carpeting on my cheek that morning, and I just laid there and I cried, and I remembered all the arrangements he taught me on the piano, the techniques he taught me, and all it was going through my head, because I wanted to be remembered of the good things he brought in my life, not just this god-awful sad day. I thought remembering the good things would help me. I don't know that it did, but something like, the piano bench he taught me, its design is for a reason. Why don't they have a piano chair? It's a piano bench. Because you need to slide over to get this part of the keys, slide over to get that part. The muscles on your arm are different muscles if you're doing this, as opposed to sliding over and doing it straight forward. You see, am I making any sense?
I understand completely what you mean, yeah.
I didn't know that until he taught me that. And it makes every complicated arrangement easier to play. And that's why it's a piano bench. He taught me so much, so I was thinking, and the next thing I remember, I went out to Kentucky Fried Chicken down the street about dinner time, and brought it home, and then made my flight arrangements to go back to Japan, back to my career, which is what I did. I packed up a few things. I could foresee that his estate would sell everything, and his life tenancy in the ownership of the garage and that guest house cottage would be sold.
Mm-hmm.
And I packed up a couple of boxes, and then a few months later I did come back and packed up the rest of my stuff and left. But I left with a whole lot of memories.
Oh, no doubt. And I'm glad you're sharing with me. I mean, the memories you're sharing with us aren't very nice ones, but it's important because there's so many stories about the end of his life, and there was some that were fabricated by him and his team, as well as the press, as well as the friends and quote unquote friends that stole from him. At the end, that's what I find so mind-blowing, is that they just had no morals at all, just no conscience.
Well, they were in it for what they could get from the beginning, Scott. It was not a new reaction from them. Every single one of them were in it from the beginning. Remember I told you, I just mentioned about those two guys that were there in the dressing room putting the rings on along with the maid and the boyfriend? Those two guys have witnessed to his last will and testament. Trusted friends. After mid-January, when Lee was released from the ER at Eisenhower, they figured, this is the end. Lee had funded a mortgage for them. Lee was carrying the paper, which he did for a few people. Instead of going to the bank for a loan for your house, just go to Lee, and he could make the interest. And he knew you, he trusted you, so it was a win-win. Well, these two guys had their mortgage paid by Lee, and they asked him, it looks like something's gonna happen. Come on, Lee, just forgive the loan.
Gross.
Forgive the loan.
God, people are gross.
And you know what? He did. He did. He forgave a $400,000 mortgage that he had paid for, and he was carrying the paper on that, and just forgave and signed off. There was no further claim to that property from Liberace organization. So these people were calculating from the beginning. It's not just Lee, Scott. It's a lot of famous people have people in their world like that, and hopefully they get smart to it and get rid of those people. But it comes with fame. It's part of the price of being rich and famous. You have people that want to be you. They want to take what you have and keep it for themselves because you mean nothing. Get out of the way.
Do you think that Liberace was charmed by all that? Here's my theory is that when you get famous, you don't want to hear negative things anymore. So if somebody says, you know what, this is a really good idea, he says, I don't want that negativity in my life anymore, and would fire them and get somebody that would agree with them all the time.
It's like you were there, Scott. That's exactly Liberace's attitude about everything.
Yeah.
And it worked for him because he could control his world.
Mm-hmm.
He could control who was in it. He could control what they said. And he did. And it ended up biting him in the ass, if you ask me.
Sure. Now I got to ask you, Jamie was part of all of that.
Yeah.
He played the grieving widow for a while.
No, he never did.
No?
No, he never did. He gave that interview in 1995, 1994 to the National Enquirer, and that's the only time he ever talked about Lee. He never played it. I never saw him cry.
Did he get it? Was he a beneficiary of the estate?
Yes. Get this, for only $500,000 plus the car that Lee had given him some years earlier.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, Lee had $7.5 million when he died. Most of all of that went to his charity, Liberace Foundation for the Performing and Creative Arts in Las Vegas. But $700,000 went to Jamie, Carrie James Wyatt. And in this will, Seymour Heller had always thought that he would be the executor of Lee's will. He would be the CEO of the Liberace Foundation. He'd manage that. He'd manage Lee's brand. That's what Seymour was expecting. Well, surprise, surprise, no. Lee found out that Seymour had been skimming off some money on tours, and especially the merchandising that would be in the gift shops outside the showroom in Hilton, where you buy the Liberace calendars, the Liberace coffee mugs, and everything. He was skimming a great deal off of that, and Lee set him up and caught him doing that. And with that betrayal, he changed and made his attorney the executor of the will. Well, an executor by California state law can get a certain percentage of the value of the estate for administering the estate. So that's, Seymour lost, close to $1 million, and he was not happy with that at all. So he got together with Lee's boyfriend, Jamie, and the maid, and said, listen, if you'll testify on my behalf, I will sue the estate for fraud and to be reinstated as executor, and I'll give you equal shares. I'll share everything equally with you. That's hugely illegal to do, tamper like that, but he did, and they said yes, and they filed suit in Las Vegas contesting the will. And that suit was national news day in, day out throughout April, May, and June of 1987. At this point, I had purchased a home, my first house, in Lake Arrowhead, and I was at my house when I get a phone call. I forget from who, but they asked me, would I testify in this trial? And I said, yes. I said, who is he suing? He's suing Lee's attorney. And I said, well, you don't need just me. I can give you other witnesses that were there. Lee's best friend, Tito Minor. I give you a whole bunch of people that can show you that Seymour was stealing from Lee. Lee knew it, and that's why he was cut out of the will. That the boyfriend was screwing the maid, and the maid was, at a we found out, by the way, it was a motel, Palm Grove Motel, the north end of Palm Canyon Drive. We had all the details and all the proof as to exactly why these people were not given millions. And I said, I can give you the name. Have Lee's attorney or his office call me, and I'll give them the names of these other people. They can testify too. And other employees on the property here. And that's exactly what happened. And I flew to Las Vegas. They asked me to give testimony, and I did. And it was shocking. It's in the local papers there, what I said. And to back up what I said, witness after witness after witness either gave sworn depositions or appeared in court and told the truth, one after the other. That was a tsunami of defeat that hit Seymour Heller right in the face and ended his chances of winning any kind of a lawsuit against the estate, against the will.
It's fascinating.
It was a big turning of the tide, so to speak.
So we know Liberace passed away at the Cloisters. He was taken to Forest Lawn. The Riverside County coroner brought him back, re-autopsied him, or did an autopsy, a proper one, and then they took him back to Forest Lawn and embalmed him and got him prepared. Then they brought him back again to Palm Springs for a funeral, and this is the church. Right here.
Our Lady of Solitude Catholic Chapel here in Palm Springs in the Las Palmas neighborhood. It's literally across the street from Lee's house.
Mm-hmm.
I attended Mass here a couple of times. It was a favored church for him here. It's a beautiful building.
So there were 3 funerals.
Yes.
You were saying.
Right. That one was for the family.
This one here?
Immediate friends, yes. Yeah. And his body attended that service.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were quite paranoid about the press finding out and being here, the service was very quick, 15-20 minutes at the most. And then they wheeled him back out again right this door across here to a waiting hearse parked here.
It's a noisy neighborhood.
Yeah, well, it is today.
Yeah.
It's height of season right now. But then from here, they took his body back to Forest Lawn, Hollywood.
So they brought him back here just for a quick 15-20 minute ceremony.
Well, it was a funeral mass, a shortened funeral mass for him that his sister attended. I think her kids were here. His so-called friends were here. Who was here? Seymour was here. I was here. Lee's previous boyfriend, Scott Thorson, claims he was here. Well, nobody saw him.
Okay.
And
let's walk around to the front, if you don't mind.
And I spoke with Scott on the phone just a couple of years ago, before his latest incarceration in Nevada, and asked him to explain that to me. I said, I was there at that service, Scott. I don't remember seeing you. Mm-hmm. And he just hemmed and hawed and didn't really have any answers for me. I checked with Joel and other people. Nobody saw Scott here at all.
All right, so that is sort of one of the elephants in the room as far as his life goes, Scott Thorson.
Right.
So Scott, I don't know, relative, say he cashed out, but there wasn't all that much money, was there? I mean, after he sold the story, the Galimony story, was paid off, thrown out of the apartment building in on Beverly Boulevard.
Right.
He sort of went there and stomped around and said, I'm not leaving, and they saw to it that he left. I mean, that was portrayed properly in the movie, wasn't it?
In the movie, they left one important thing out, and that is all of his belongings, his clothes and all. While Scott was being physically dragged out by bodyguards and taken downstairs out of the property, his clothing was gathered up and put in trash bags, several trash bags, and literally thrown over the railing of the where the pool was, the outdoor pool on the top of the penthouse of that building, and crashed 6 stories down to the ground. And they gave him his trash bags full of belongings and told him to get lost. So that was left out of the movie, but that was a real unceremonious end to his glamour life.
It was an unceremonious end. He made it that way, though, didn't he?
Well, he went public. He did not like the way Lee had him thrown out and the way Lee broke up with him. He didn't like it, so he was bitter, and so he went to the press and exposed his relationship with Liberace and sued him for palimony for, I don't remember how many, 16 million was it? Something like that. He ended up getting a judgment of $165,000. That judgment was a settlement that was approved by a judge for $165,000 plus a couple of dogs, plus a couple of cars. One of them was a silver Rolls Royce. Within months of getting those items and that cash, it was gone. He used it all for drugs, and he admits that.
Yeah, he's been pretty forthcoming.
Yeah.
He's been paid well to be forthcoming about what he's done. You know, with everything, with the Wonderland murders, with Michael Jackson.
Right.
You know, he was involved with all of that. I'm curious, like when it came to Mark Christian and Rock Hudson. You know, Mark Christian sued the Hudson estate because he was exposed to HIV or the AIDS virus by Rock Hudson. It was never divulged to him. Does Scott have any kind of legal standing in that regard?
Not that I know of. Maybe other people know more about that than I do, but I never heard that claim or anything like that from Scott Thorson.
So, were you here for this service, Steve? And
In the back.
how many people do you think were here?
Less than 10.
Oh, was that intimate? And who spoke? Was it just the
Nobody.
priest?
Nobody, yeah. Just the priest. There was no eulogy. Well, there was some brief words by a neighbor, but no real. The whole thing was over and done with so fast.
Did they have music?
No.
No music?
No.
That's surprising.
Right. Well, it was supposed to be a funeral mass, but they had to cut it way, way, way down. Because the longer they're here, the bigger the chances of people finding out and the press showing up. See, in retrospect, who cares if the press is outside? What are they going to do, bomb the place? No, let them be outside. So what? Have your funeral. So what? I don't know why they were so paranoid.
Protective, yeah. I guess they're still thinking it is a shameful thing, and they probably don't want that, attention. I'm guessing. That's my interpretation.
Well, I think, they had something to hide, and that was his AIDS. And they just wanted to hide from the press. I thought it was ridiculous. No harm in the press being out there at all, in my view.
Now, I read somewhere, but it wouldn't have been here, that Kirk Douglas attended, but that would have been in Vegas, would it have been?
L.A., Hollywood
Okay.
Hills.
Oh, Forest Lawn, okay. But now, did they use this church? I heard they used this church in behind the candelabra.
They did.
So this was where his funeral was, in that
Correct.
church.
Reenacted.
Is this where he went up above, at the end when he
Yes.
floated up like a ghost?
Correct.
That was filmed here.
Right.
Fascinating. Huh. Oh, look at it.
What does it say?
It says Liberace. Valentino
Oh, he
Liberace.
donated the pew.
And there's his birth and death dates. How nice. He's not
He
forgotten.
donated a lot of money to this Catholic church here over the years, and I suspect this pew would be one of them.
As you know, if you follow my channel, I'm really into matchbooks and taking back matchbooks to where they came from. Now, this isn't exactly where it came from, but this is a Liberace matchbook that they used to sell at the Liberace Museum in Las Vegas. The museum's gone now. Most everything having to do with Liberace physically, well, his houses are still around, but this is the most important house. This is the property that we're standing in front of that was owned by Liberace and ultimately where he passed away. And Steve, my friend here, used to work with Liberace, used to be friends with Liberace, close friends with Liberace.
Yeah, I never worked with him.
No.
He offered one time to put me in the show because he had guest acts in his stage show. For the purpose being for costume changes.
Yeah.
He had 4 or 5 costume changes per show. So that took place while the guest act was on board, whether it was on stage, whether it be jugglers or ballet folklorico dancers or a singer. They'd be performing for 3 or 4 minutes while Lee was off
Doing the
stage
costume
changing
change, okay.
into the next costume. But I did not want to change the dynamic. He was my friend. He was my piano teacher. He's my next door neighbor. Come on. I didn't want to be on his payroll. like everybody else in his orbit. You know, he preferred to have people on his payroll. It's kind of a control freak kind of aspect of him, but I didn't want that. Plus, you know, he was offering me $1,000 a week. He and Seymour. The call came from Seymour, offering me $1,000 a week. Well, I was making more than that on my own here. So if I went into his show, what kind of career move is that for me? You know, it wouldn't have benefited me any more than what I was already doing. So we remained friends for 6 years, right up until his death.
Now tell me about PJ.
Oh, PJ. Well, everybody knew that Lee.
PJ is one of.
Just a second, yeah.
Okay.
Everybody knew that Liberace loved dogs, and so from time to time, he would be gifted with dogs. In August of 1986, somebody, a friend of his, gave him a dog as a gift. And that turned out to be Liberace's last dog. It was a miniature poodle, white, that Lee named Precious Jewel, or PJ for short. Lee's PJ was a beautiful dog, and when Lee died, all of his dogs, 26 of them, were very quickly adopted out to friends of Lee's. Like in less than a week, they'd all been adopted by friends. And I stayed in touch with the family that adopted Lee's PJ, Precious Jewel. Well, Lee's PJ lived to be almost 24 years old.
Jeez.
23 years and 11 months. And he died in 2012, at nearly 24 years of age. But in his lifetime, he was bred and had a few generations of puppies. And I was now looking for a non-allergic, non-shedding dog. And a mutual friend of ours said, why don't you call people that have PJ? And I said, well, he's got to be old. And they said, well, I did. They said he's 23 years, 11 months, but he has a great-great-great-grandson from a litter that we are putting up for adoption. We don't want any money from it, from you. If you want the dog, come and meet the dog. And anyway, long story short, I did. I fell in love with their puppy immediately, and he is the great-great-great-grandson of Liberace's dog, PJ. So I named my little dog PJ as well. PJ, sweetie.
Sweet.
Come here, Angel. Oh, come here, baby boy. This is PJ.
Sweet.
And he is the great-grandson of Liberace's dog, who was identical. Same off-white color, same demeanor, same personality, and fortunately the same health. He's a very, very healthy dog. I adopted him in, I think it was 2012, and he's now 12 years old.
Sweet.
Little PJ. He's a very good dog. Smartest dog ever, and he obviously comes from a very good lineage, very healthy lineage. And I've had him go through service dog training. He is scent detection certified as a service animal in the state of California. And so he can go anywhere with me in flights and anywhere.
Got a little bit of, here we go.
Yeah, he's a good boy.
He is well behaved, very nice, and very protective.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Well, thank you very much for bringing Charlie and PJ and yourself out here. I appreciate it.
Well, thank
this
you,
has been
Scott.
Fascinating.
You said you had some photographs.
I do, yeah. As you
Take a
know,
look.
when I was at the Heller's estate, there were a lot of negatives, and I just grabbed up the negatives and I wanted to go through them quickly with you to see. I printed them up and see what you think, and maybe we could just look over these and you'll be able to identify some of the people in these photographs.
Sure.
Hopefully.
If I can.
Yeah. So, okay. Do you know who this gentleman is?
I don't, but it looks like Alan Ludden.
Oh, it sure does look like Alan Ludden. There's another picture.
It was. This is Terry
There he is
Clark.
right here, too.
Go stay here for a second. Alan Ludden and Terry Clarkston. Terry Clarkston was Liberace's costume manager. And on stage, you know, when Lee would throw the cape off his back,
Yeah.
you see a handsome guy in a tuxedo behind him catching the cape in every show. That's Terry. And Terry's still alive and well today, lives here in Palm Springs. And that's him between shows with Alan Ludden.
And that's Seymour Heller.
Yes.
And Alan and this giant.
don't-
Oh, it's a woman. Sorry.
I don't know that.
It's a little. Okay, so.
This was at a wedding reception for David Hasselhoff's mother. Lee was good friends with David Hasselhoff and his mother, and Lee played piano at David's mother's wedding. And this was taken at that. I
And
recognize
there's
it.
Jamie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know the ladies.
Okay.
And this too is at the wedding of David Hasselhoff's mother.
Liberace must have got a lot of invitations to go to weddings. Did they?
I don't know.
I would imagine. Let's bring Liberace and they go. Oh, come on, play a song for us,
Right,
Lee. Kind of this
right.
thing, you know, as
Yeah.
entertainers always got. No, I guess they're hauling in a piano there.
This is when they were on tour and setting up in the afternoon before an evening show. Lee he traveled with a conductor and a drummer and a lucite piano lid. That's it. And he had an arrangement with Baldwin Piano Company to have a 9-foot concert grand provided by Baldwin and delivered to the theater or the auditorium or arena wherever Lee was playing. So this piano is coming from Baldwin for the use for one day.
In each city, Baldwin would give him
Correct.
a piano.
And
Interesting.
he would have his staff take the existing lid off of the piano and put his clear lucite lid on it.
Okay.
So that's what that is.
Fascinating. More wedding pictures, I
Yeah.
think.
That is Hasselhoff's mother in the white hat. This was Christmas Eve here at the Cloisters Estate here in Palm Springs, where we're standing now. That was in the family room
Where he died.
where he died, and pretty much at that spot.
Oh, see, now that's one of those windows, isn't it?
There's one right there.
So he put stained glass on the other side.
did.
Okay.
He
Okay.
And artwork on the inside of those windows. And that's Lee opening presents. That would be Christmas of 83 or 84.
And there's Jamie again.
Yeah, this is that same Christmas party. That's Gladys Lucky, his longtime trusted maid from Las Vegas. She came in. That is Tito Minor, who I spoke of earlier.
Oh, sure.
Liberace's ultimate best friend for a lifetime. And they're sitting on that silver gray sectional that Lee was laying on when I first came to see him February 2nd, a couple days before he died.
Before they moved him into a hospital bed.
Correct, yeah. I don't know these people. That is Dora Liberace. That is George Liberace's last wife, Lee's sister-in-law. Taken there in the den.
Interesting to see these, a lot of car memorabilia, fancy car stuff.
Yeah.
And then these are the last ones I have.
That is Billy Heller, Seymour's wife. I don't know that gentleman. Taken still in that same room. Is that Seymour here?
That does look like Seymour.
This
And
gentleman, let me look. It looks like Vince Franza, the next door neighbor, lived here next to where I live. Lee.
then Jamie again.
I don't know that's.
Pretty
No,
sure.
that's not Jamie.
No?
The dark hair. I don't know who that would be. I have to.
And
at it
then there's one
closer.
person, two people back there, but it's hard to tell who they are.
Gray hair. I don't know.
But those-
I don't see any other faces. I just see that
Yeah.
face. Is there another one?
There's one right behind her, but it's impossible to see. But so and also the other thing I wanted to ask you while we were out in front, but where was the chapel located in the house?
Directly between the pool and the garage.
The breezeway there? Down the breezeway?
No, there's a breezeway between his mother's bedroom and the garage.
Okay.
Then go east, 4-car garage, and then you see a wall.
Yeah. Immediately
other side of that wall, in the middle, would be his shrine to St. Anthony. On the street side of that, you see the driveway going to the 4-car garage. On the street side would be pool, and then on our immediate left would be servants' quarters, which is a 1-bedroom service cottage. But in the middle would be the shrine to St. Anthony.
Okay.
So
it wasn't a chapel, online. It was a shrine.
Correct.
Okay.
Little space. He had antique religious memorabilia, some stained glass windows, some crucifix, and allegedly it was there for him to have privacy when in prayer. I never saw him use it.
Mm-hmm.
But there it was.
Interesting. That's fascinating. Fascinating.
Yeah.
This whole afternoon's been fascinating. Thank you.
It's been a great deal of fun. I appreciate you coming out, Scott. I do.
I'm glad, because these memories, you're sharing them with a lot of people right now, and stories should be repeated.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Well, Liberace is famous for a lot of things, but what people really need to take away from their own Liberace experience is what a good, a decent man he was. He really genuinely cared about people. He cared about me. He cared about his dogs. He cared about his relatives. And he was sincere. He was not a phony bone in that man's body. He cared about people. And so as I look back on my own lifetime, he's one of the friends that I'm really appreciative that I had. He did a lot for me, taught me how to be from a decent piano player to a pretty good piano player. I'm appreciative of that and of his friendship. He deserves to be remembered.
Yeah, keeping the memories alive. That's so cool. Well, thank you for doing that with us.
Well, thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Appreciate it a lot. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks. That's good. Very, very interesting stuff.
You heard me.